Hi, everybody. I'm Tara Bradley with the Growth State. Thank you for joining us today. I'm very excited about the guest we have today. His name is Perry Jeffries. He's the president of Diamond Equity Advisors, which is a registered investment advisory and business consulting firm. He's known as the entrepreneur's CFO. And to that end, he's worked with a lot of small businesses. He's actually created a system called the PASS system, which I'm hoping he'll tell us a little bit about today. That stands for Profit Acceleration Small Business System. He's regularly featured on Fox 28 in Columbus, Ohio, with a segment called Financially Fit Fridays. And how I found him was through Entrepreneurs on Fire with John Lee Dumas. And he had a podcast that was called You're Accidentally Killing Your Company, which none of us want to do, especially as we're starting to scale. So Perry, thank you so much for being with us today. I'm super excited to have you. I'm going to start with a question that I ask everyone. I find that those of us who have made the leap from working for somebody else to working for ourselves, there's generally a pain point where you're like, hey, I can help someone not torture themselves the way that I did. Tell us what that is for you and how that helped you pivot into the business that you have today.
Yeah, absolutely, Tara. Definitely a pleasure to be here and have a conversation with you. So my pain point is actually two that more or less put us into this pivot in the direction that we're in right now. So the first one was, many don't know, is that I had about a $4 million portfolio real estate portfolio that I grew from about 2001 to roughly 2009. And we kind of remember when the market crashed there in 2007, 2009, the real estate crash and whatnot. Mm-hmm. So at that time, I had transitioned from being a personal trainer into being a financial advisor. So I got licensed as an advisor in 2003, but had started buying property in 2001. Well, when the market crashed, I was one of those investors out there overextended, living high on the hog, because back then the mortgage piece was super easy to get. Like, you could get a mortgage and then you have to show proof of income at the time. So you had no doc loans and things of that nature. So we had a lot of the arm loans on our properties and things of that nature. So long story short, lost everything. And in the midst of losing everything there, Tara, found out I was going to become a dad to not one, but two little people in 2009. Wow. So you run into this scenario of, okay, all right, so we're hemorrhaging money. We're hemorrhaging, $5 to $7 grand a month just to try to keep this thing afloat. We had no financial systems in place. Literally, it was, okay, I know how to go out and make money. Okay, I know how to go out and invest in properties. I understand lending, but there was really no system around what we were doing to kind of give us, the guidelines or kind of those training wheels to make sure that we didn't go off track, if you will. So long story short, lost everything. And I remember one of the biggest pain points I had was coming home one of those days, and my daughter's newborns were at the house with their mom, and I walked in and the lights were off. And I'm like, yo, why are the lights off? Lights had got turned off. So it's like, that was one of those pain points. It's like, oh my goodness. Hindsight being 2020, I had no idea that was going to be part of my story moving forward as a CFO. So that was one of my pain points right there. And then the second one, fast forward. So not to paint all gloom and doom, but eventually, we got out of that situation, start making really good money in the corporate space, doing really good income. So doing, mid six figures, if you will. And I helped a bank. Won't name the bank's name, but I helped the bank bring in about $1 billion in assets. Me and 3 other advisors working sun up to sundown in a pilot program, brought in just shy of $1 billion in assets to the program, just to get laid off 6 months later. And I remember being brought into the office and, hey, so what's going on? They said, hey, Perry, the firm has decided to part ways today. And I asked them on what grounds. They gave me their reasoning. The reason was, hey, we kind of had some issues with your outside business activities, because anybody knows me, I'm an entrepreneur, so they probably could see the writing on the wall that this guy's probably going to be leaving sooner or later. But long story short, I remember walking to the desk with my manager, who he and I were super close. So this came from up top and not from a local level. And I remember walking to the desk and I looked at him, Terry, and I said, hey, man, how am I supposed to take care of my family? And he looks at me dead in the face. He says, Perry, I don't know. You're sharp and I know you'll figure it out. So after, being pretty stressed out and drinking a couple bottles of vodka and whiskey, after I recovered from that, right? Because now it's like, oh my goodness, I went from losing everything, a seven-figure portfolio during this time frame, trying to provide for my family, take care of my newborn daughters. Now I made it back, just get knocked down again. It's like, what in the world do I do? So I decided then that I would never put myself in a position ever again where I would have to ask another business person or entity, how I'm going to take care of my family, because ultimately the only person's responsibility to take care of my family is mine. So that's when I set out and I said, you know what, I'm going to do this entrepreneurship thing. So that's what kind of led me into my journey. And hindsight being 2020, to your point, those issues of losing everything, not once, but twice, and learning from those really gave me a phenomenal skill set, because I worked with some larger firms where I took companies public. I worked with a very large a national bank where I understood the banking platform. I understood real estate financing. So it kind of, all of those situations or those experiences, which were painful at the time, really gave me a phenomenal skill set that really helped entrepreneurs moving forward the way we do now. So
Perfect.
that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
I know, right? I find we all have, like, there's something we're like, man, that sucked. I don't ever want to do it again, and I don't want someone else to have to go through it. So I appreciate you sharing that. On your LinkedIn profile, it lists you as a fractional CFO. Tell the people that are listening what that is and why they might be interested in that.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you think about your corporate structure, right, you have your CEO, who is typically, your high vision individual, right? So it's like, hey, this is the vision of the company. This is where we're going to go. They're usually ones who created the product or the service, or whatever the case may be. But typically, the next C-level person that you would hire on would be probably your CFO, right? Because you got to have your finances in order. Well, unfortunately, your medium salary for a CFO, I think as of 2017, was roughly $371,000. Well, it's not a lot of, solopreneurs or even small businesses who can afford to pay 300,000 for a CFO, though it's super important to have that person on your team. So as a fractional CFO, we come in for a fraction of the cost. So instead of you having to fork out, a couple $100,000 for an in-house CFO, you have a virtual CFO who we work with our clients and meet with them. We have a monthly finance meeting, and we go through all of their finances. And where we found we provide the most value to the CEO, they're busy. Right. So you know the drill. Like, we're busy moving and grooving, doing what we need to do. Well, a lot of times they don't have the time to interpret the financial data, right? Or they don't even know what the financial data is. They're doing their thing, selling XYZ over here, and they're getting these bookkeeper reports, or, the P&L, or they're getting, the tax returns, and they really don't understand it. We jump in as the go-between the CEO and those other individuals, the bookkeeper and the CPA, get the data, digest it, and then be able to present it to the CEO so they can make strategic decisions. So that's what we do as a fractional CFO.
Sure. And so for those of you listening, I think it's really important that you understand this point, because if you find you're at a point where you're either looking to grow and run the business, or you're looking for a financial partner for sure, or an exit, those base level bookkeeping reports aren't going to do you any good. And for you to synthesize them yourself, that's a lot of time and effort. Where you use that CFO knowledge is to really them to understand the strategy of where you're headed, and them to paint the financial roadmap for you to get there. I've done this a few times. I am not that person. I'd be the first one signing up saying, you just give me all of my data points. I can make a good decision. And so this is a great way, if you, like you said, if you aren't ready or don't have the resources or don't want to make the leap, you're making that transition to strategic CEO. This is a great way to be supported in your business and really start to think very, very strategically about your finances. And I think that's probably the best way to identify. I think what you do is it's a way to have that strategic presence financially without having to invest in a full-time CFO.
I couldn't have articulated better, Tara. That's spot on, my friend.
Perfect. Tell us the biggest mistake that leaders in a scaling company make financially when they're kind of at this spot where it's like they're growing, business is going great, they're finally getting some money coming in. What's the big mistake that they make at this point in the juncture?
So I hate to sound cliche, but it's not. What I see is not having a system and unfortunately trying to do everything yourself. I believe John Maxwell has a quote that says something to the effect of that a system allows individuals to achieve extraordinary results predictably. And if you don't have the finances to have your own CFO to give you that second set of eyes, that strategic partner and things of that nature, then you got to have the system in place. So one of the biggest mistakes I see entrepreneurs do is they're trying to wear all of the hats. They're the CEO, CFO, CI, CMO, like the whole nine. They're the whole C suite.
Janitor, the whole,
Oh yeah,
yeah,
the whole
for
the
sure.
whole nine, the whole nine. Running Facebook ads. So what I see is, as you're growing your business, knowing where your money is going is super important. So you got to have that system so you can really identify and know your numbers. It's mind blowing to me how many times I'm working with 7-figure companies on the surface look good to everybody else. Like, oh my God, XY, so and so's doing 7 figures. They absolutely are doing 7 figures in top line revenue, but they still don't understand the numbers. And I've seen companies run in the red while still doing 7 figures, right?
Mm-hmm.
So just knowing those numbers and having a system to help you really navigate those numbers.
Sure. And to know your numbers, it's the one thing that I'm always surprised at when I talk to somebody and I'm saying, well, what do you need? What's the goal? Where are you headed? If you're going to grow and run this company, what do you need to live and for you to grow the company and for your employees to have a good living? And I'm always surprised and I'm like, we're barely profitable. Like, well, that's not, profitability is a great goal, but that's not the number that you're getting to and focusing on.
Exactly. And kind of, not to oversimplify, but just understanding that income is not profit. That a
Right.
lot of people, revenue is not profit. So like, oh yeah, I'm doing 7 figures, but you know what I'm saying? So if you're bringing in, $100,000 a month, but you're burning 120, that's but it's like, oh, so understanding that revenue is not profit, and then really being able to, separate those dollars. Kind of one of our two of our sayings that we say a lot with our company is, let no dollar go unemployed. So we believe in every dollar already having a pre-allocated direction to go. And also to be able to see your business in 3D. And what we mean by that is being able to make data-driven decisions. So those are the areas that I find a lot of entrepreneurs struggle. And that's why we kind of come in with the systems that we do.
Sure. Tell us a little bit about the system that you put together, the PASS system.
Yeah. So our Profit Accelerator Small Business System, this is the birth child of me making tons of bad financial choices, right? So the quick story is I kind of shared with you, that day I lost my last corporate job. And what I found when I went out on my own, I continued as a, quote unquote, traditional financial advisor. But what I realized very quickly was being a financial advisor and financial advisor in this sense, stocks and retirement plans and things of that nature, that skill set doesn't really transition into running business finances. So a lot of people think like, oh, you're a financial guy. No. I actually had to go out and learn that. So
Right.
running the business versus offering products is very, very different. So when you start to understand cash flow and balance sheet and profitability and margins and things of that nature, that's a whole nother ball of wax, right? So what I found is that when I went independent, 80 to 90% of my clients were entrepreneurs like me. And what I found, Terry, is that they didn't need, a good stock idea. Hey, what's the best retirement plan? That's something like, yeah, it's kind of on their radar, but literally they're just trying to stay in business from a cash flow standpoint. So when I identified this need and saw that I had the same need, I went out and just, kind of just made it my mission to go out and learn everything I could about cash flow, which is kind of interesting because I dealt with banks and the bankers and lending and things of that nature. I just had never turned that into an offering. So long story short, I found this book at a mastermind group out in California. And during that mastermind group, somebody came out and did a really short, like 10, 15-minute PowerPoint presentation on profit first. And I saw this profit first methodology, and I'm sitting there in California like, oh my God, this is it. This is simple. This makes sense. This is easy to follow. So I just dove into the book. I got the book on Audible, listened to it, ordered the book, had it highlighted. And it's like, this is amazing. So I just start putting my systems together, kind of first, initially around just the profit first piece. And then I said to myself, I said, well, I've read the book, but what else don't I know about this, this system? So I reached out to the group over at Profit First, Mike McCallowitz and those guys out there. And next thing you know, I'm enrolled in a Profit First University and became a certified Profit First professional. So I'm a certified PFP. So the PASS program is profit first as the chassis, and then everything that I've done traditionally as an advisor added on top of it. So the retirement planning, the tax mitigation and optimization, the retirement planning, the investing, the lending. So what we did is we took the profit first model, and then from there we built onto it with my entire skill set as a traditional advisor to create the PASS program.
Perfect. Um, I love that you brought that up. One of the things that I think entrepreneurs they forget about or they're very scared of is the lending piece, the debt piece. They're so terrified to get debt, even when there's really great programs for them. They get this fear about having to pay it back. How should we as entrepreneurs look at debt, particularly if we're thinking about eventually getting another financial partner or looking to an exit? How should we evaluate debt and whether or not it's a good choice for us?
Yeah. So how we go about debt annihilation, as we call it within the PASS program, is we actually send our clients' debt through what we call a cash flow index model. So what it is a calculation that looks at, the current balance, the total limit, the payment, the interest rate, and things of that nature, and kind of runs through this formula. But what that does for us, it then allows us to immediately identify the debt that is the most toxic or we call cancerous to the cash flow. In doing this, now we have it ranked, if we have 4 debts, now they're ranked, 1, 2, 3, and 4, and we know which ones to attack first. So a lot of times when we think about debt, people think about, oh, well, you got to attack the highest interest rates. That's not necessarily accurate from a cash flow standpoint. What you want to do is attack the debts that have the most painful terms with respects to your cash flow. So now that if we get it prioritized, now we can go about attacking that debt. But what it also allows us to do is we have debt that's in the danger zone. So let's say 0 to 50. We have debt that's in the caution zone. So let's say that's 51 to 75, and then 76 to 100 plus is in the freedom zone. The freedom zone are the debts like, you know what, this is actually a pretty healthy debt. It's not killing our cash flow, right?
Mm.
All the way going down to those danger zones. That is the cancer that we gotta, get out of the body ASAP. So now the client is now, and with respects to debt, they now are taking the emotion out of dealing with the debt and now looking at it for what it is. So a realistic scenario of that, Tara, a real-time scenario is that we was helping a client who received, during the pandemic, they got some of the, small business grants that were flown around.
Yeah.
And it was like, okay, so what happens usually when people get a big lump sum of money? Oh, they want to just, hey, I really hate this debt or really want to pay this off, and you just throw it all down here. No, we're not doing that. We're going to look at all the debt, run everything through the cash flow index model, and then from there, we're going to earmark. And by doing that, she was able to keep extra probably $10,000-$15,000 in her pocket because we didn't just blow all of the money. We systematically paid off debt, bumped that up against the cash flows. It was able to make really, really good data-driven decisions. So the thing with debt, I would tell, entrepreneurs is this, is nothing to be afraid of, but you got to have some type of system in place to allow you to manage the debt and take emotion out the equation, because bringing on some healthy funding could help with expansion, right?
Mhm.
In a major way. But also too, if you got some bad debt that's eating into your cash flows, you got to acknowledge that, and you got to figure out how to cut that away from your cash flow so you can, continue to have healthy dollars coming in, because ultimately business is about cash flow. If you don't have cash flow in business, you're not in business.
Right. So really what we're talking about is if you've got some good debt, the terms are great and it's helping you grow, might be something that's a great option for you. If you're cash strapped and you're not able to do some things because all of your cash is going to debt, probably time to get rid of some of that.
Yeah. And then last, I would throw on the debt piece, Tara, is that we run everything through what's called a ROI calculator as well, so a return on investment
Uh-huh.
calculator. Um, I'll use a real life example. We're dealing now with, the pandemic. We had all of the economic injury disaster loans come out, right? So the idle loans. So people are
Right.
getting the idle loans to stay afloat. Well, the terms of the loan is phenomenal, right? 3.75% over 30 years. You don't have your first payment until, 12 months after you get funding, right? So the terms really look favorable. But if you keep this loan for 30 years, it's just like a mortgage. When we backed into the numbers, I believe it was, I don't have it in front of me right now, but if you got a $50,000 loan, I believe it was an $83,000 payback over those years. So when I broke back into the number, it came down to, for every dollar a loan that allocate to something, you have to have at least a 160% return on investment just to break even. So
Mhm.
when you start to look at your money that way, hey, I'm going to spend this dollar loan, but it's me spending this dollar loan on this, whatever I'm spending on over here, is that going to get me $1.60 back? If not, you're not hitting break even, and now you're losing on the loan. So that's how we like our clients to be able to view that stuff. Is like, what is the ROI on this? Can I get a 3.5% loan and go out and make 10%? That could possibly make really good sense on paper.
Sure.
So yep. So that's how we go about that.
Perfect. So again, the terms are super important. You just have to make sure you understand both the short-term implications and the long-term, cost of that debt.
Absolutely.
Um, Tell me a little bit about your perspective, Perry, on those CEOs, founders, leaders that have done a great job in bootstrapping. They're just getting to that strategic mindset, and they've decided that they want to get a partner, a VC or a PE, and that's kind of their long-term goal. What's the financial mindset shift that they need to make to move and be prepared for that kind of relationship?
So you really have to have crystal clarity around the potential growth in your business. So when you start bringing on venture capital or private equity firms or things of that nature, I've seen this as well, because we've have a couple clients who are in that tech space. And that tech space is obviously super hot, and they're always looking for those VC relationships or private equity, if you will. And it's almost amazing that they have no idea their numbers on the current business. So think about it. If you're going to bring in a partner, right? You know what I'm saying? With that type of financial backing, that partner, or if you want to, even be appealing to that partner, you have to know your numbers. You have to know your projections. You need to know your cash flow, right? And granted, if you're a startup and it's still kind of new, well, then you need to know the competition in the marketplace so that you can at least back into those numbers and show, hey, this is a comp, just like with real estate. Hey, this is a property, for 200,000, and ours is going to be worth 200,000, and this is what it is. So you need to know the marketplace. You need to really know, those companies' numbers, because your numbers are still new, but you still need to be able to paint a really good picture to that VC and that PE partner, right? So again, it all comes down to just knowing your numbers and realistic numbers. And when I say realistic in different spaces is different, right? So like a 600% return on a stock portfolio is not realistic in my world, but that on 600%, year over year growth in some tech space may actually be realistic. But again, right? But you still need to know what the comps are out there so that you're basing your numbers on some data that actually makes sense. That's what the VC people want to see. They want to see that you have a good idea. They also want to see that you have a team. So the kind of straddle back and forth between what we're talking about. If you're looking to bring on those type of relationships, you better be taking yourself out the situation of making all the financial decisions. So they're going to want to know who's the CEO, who's the CFO, who's over operations. Putting your team together also makes you look really good on paper when you start going to get some of that additional financing.
Yeah, Perry, I think that that's really key. And for those that are watching, this isn't the first time we've heard this, right? You got to know your market. You got to know where you fit in the market. You need to know how much runway you have, and you have to have a great strategy with your team. And that it goes right into my very next question. So if they make the investment and they're working with you as a fractional CFO and they grow and they're like, hey, it's time for us to really be very strategic and move to a full-time resource. We can afford it. We've done all the right things, partnered with you and gotten a great financial shape. What are they looking for in a CFO? And does it change as the end game changes, right? If they're going to grow and run, or if they're going to go, an equity partner, or even an exit, what do they want to, what are the things they want to be looking for in a full-time CFO if they go down that route?
I think in looking for a full-time CFO, you have to be looking at an individual who has a wide breadth of understanding of different industries, right? we hear, and I believe this as well, that, your riches are always in your niches, right? But when you're talking about a CFO, you're talking about a strategic partner coming in to help you see the full landscape, and them having a broad knowledge around, real estate, around stocks, around other businesses, things. It's actually a benefit to you as the CEO, because now you're getting a different set of, lenses looking at things. And I think that's huge. So your CFO needs to be pretty versed, not just in one industry, but in multiple industries. Though they may have an area where hey, I'm really like, this is my niche right here, but they still need to be pretty versed in some other industries. So I think that would be one. Two, as you're looking for the strategic partner, you gotta have somebody who can speak in your language. And I say this, it sounds simple and again, kind of elementary, but I see this as usually the biggest disconnect between any person in the financial service industry and the client, if you will. As a CEO, you don't need a lot of financial, lingo. You need, hey, this is where we are. This is what this is what this means, and these are the different, directions that we can go in. These are the recommendations. So someone who can speak to you in such a way where you're not talking over your head and you understand what they're saying. So the challenge with finding a good CFO, Tara, is someone who can understand, the financial mumbo jumbo and all of that language, but then be able to digest that and bring it back to the table to be able to have that very easy conversation around, hey, this is what the numbers are saying. These are the recommendations. So I believe that's what people really should be looking for when they start talking about the CFO.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more. I mean, I admitted early on, I can talk numbers all day long, but I don't want to put them together. And I think you hit a really great point especially in a scaling company. You want that broad-based CFO who's got a lot of different, experience that they can bring to the table, but then also know and be able to trust them enough to have those really hard conversations to say, this is where we're headed. This is where we're going. This is what I need from you. And I think back to the CFO I've worked with now, and this is our third company together. And, he's just great he knows I want to know where are we at from a cash flow perspective. Are we going to run out of cash? We're growing like crazy. We're not profitable. That's okay, because we're in the tech sector. And he just keeps telling me, this is when you run out of cash. Because I have to make different decisions. And he knows to do that without me having to do it. And then he's already gone and done the work and saying, here's a lending option for you. Here's a couple of other, partners. We can go do deals. We can talk to. I really feel like kind of what you're saying is the same perspective I have, which is you almost want that CFO that if it got crazy, he could act as COO, right? They're just operationally have the cred to go and do that.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. That's a great point there, Terry. I love that. Yes, indeed.
Okay. Awesome. Well, I know we are about out of time, and I probably have 80 other questions I could ask you, and we could talk all day because this has been awesome. But tell the people that are watching how they can get connected with you or possibly work with you in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. So, kind of how we got connected. So on LinkedIn, where you found us on Entrepreneur on Fire, but on LinkedIn, obviously you can go to Perry Jeffries on LinkedIn. We do have two websites. We have a perryjeffries.com, which is my personal branding site. And then our company website is Diamond Equity Advisors, spelled ADVISORS.com. So Diamond equityadvisors.com and perryjeffries.com, and then you can find us on social media as well. So whatever your favorite social media outlet is, so whether that's Instagram or Facebook or LinkedIn, you can find us on there.
Perfect. And we'll have all of Perry's information on the opt-in page as well, and some ways to get in touch with him if you're looking for a consultation. I highly recommend it. You don't have a CFO on staff. This is a great way to kind of bridge that gap. And I know that for me, it would be money well spent. I wouldn't need the ROI calculator because I would know that would be money that I would
You're like this was a good investment. Just the peace of mind of knowing where your business is going is worth it. Indeed.
Yeah,
yes,
like,
indeed.
Oops, I missed a decimal or something crazy like that, because I've done that before. But Perry, thank you so much for your time today. I've really enjoyed the conversation, and we'll be talking to you again soon.
Awesome, Tara. Thank you for having me. I love what you're doing. Let us know any way we can support in the future.
Perfect. Thank you.